The British royal household has now arrived at what senior insiders describe as a firmly established internal position regarding the future status of Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, a position that has reportedly left Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, deeply shaken. There has been no grand announcement from Buckingham Palace, no ceremonial declaration, and no public statement delivered at a lectern. Yet behind closed doors, the direction is no longer in doubt. The monarchy has deliberately chosen institutional definition over lingering uncertainty, drawing a decisive distinction between royal lineage by birth and royal status earned through service. This choice, shaped by constitutional advice, parliamentary mood, and King Charles III's long-standing vision of a reduced and focused monarchy, represents a critical inflection point, not only for the Sussex family, but for the structural future of the crown itself. At the heart of the palace's settled position lies a distinction that has always existed within the British constitutional framework, but which has rarely been tested so visibly or so contentiously. Archie and Lilibet are, without question, the biological grandchildren of the reigning monarch. By long-established convention, that fact alone confers certain technical entitlements, including placement in the line of succession and eligibility for specific styles. However, entitlement has never been synonymous with active royal standing, and it is precisely at this junction that the palace has drawn a firm boundary. According to multiple royal correspondents and constitutional analysts, the internal consensus is that while the children will remain in the line of succession as a matter of law, their royal titles and the practical recognition attached to them will be strictly limited in scope, usage, and function. In essence, the palace has chosen containment rather than removal. This conclusion was not reached hastily. For more than 3 years, since Harry and Meghan stepped away from official royal duties and relocated permanently to the United States, the monarchy has wrestled with an unprecedented scenario. Never in modern history had senior members of the royal family voluntarily withdrawn from public service, settled abroad, and simultaneously entered into lucrative commercial arrangements while retaining royal styles and global visibility. The birth of children into this context introduced an additional layer of complexity, particularly following the death of Queen Elizabeth II and the accession of King Charles III, which automatically altered the children's technical status under rules that predated the crisis. When Buckingham Palace updated its official website in 2023 to refer to Archie and Lilibet as Prince and Princess, the move was widely misinterpreted by sections of the media as a symbolic victory for the Sussexes. Palace officials were careful at the time to stress that the update reflected existing constitutional convention, not a shift in institutional policy or an endorsement of future royal roles. Behind the scenes, however, that moment triggered a more rigorous internal examination of how those titles should be treated in practice. That review, according to sources with knowledge of the process, has now concluded. The palace's settled stance rests on 3 interlocking principles: constitutional integrity, public accountability, and institutional credibility. Constitutionally, advisors have emphasized that royal titles derive their real meaning from active service to the crown and a lived connection to the nation and commonwealth the monarchy represents. Archie and Lilibet, who are being raised privately in California and have no involvement in royal duties or public life in the United Kingdom, do not meet those criteria. From the standpoint of accountability, unease has grown within both the palace and parliament about the existence of royal designations alongside private commercial activity beyond the crown's oversight. And in terms of credibility, senior figures are acutely aware that public confidence in the monarchy depends on restraint, consistency, and a clear sense of purpose. King Charles's influence on this outcome has been decisive. Long before ascending the throne, he articulated his belief in what he termed a slimmed-down monarchy. This was never simply a matter of reducing expenditure or limiting pageantry. It was at its core a philosophy of focus. In Charles's conception, the institution should revolve around the sovereign, the heir, and a small circle of working royals who support the crown through defined public service. Titles in this model are not ornamental, they are functional. The Sussex children, through circumstances beyond their control, fall outside that functional framework. The palace's decision reflects Charles's conviction that expanding symbolic status without corresponding duty ultimately weakens the institution. Prince William, now heir to the throne, is also understood to strongly support this approach. Royal commentators note that William has been particularly sensitive to the long-term consequences of allowing royal titles to exist in a vacuum, detached from obligation. As the future king, he will inherit not only the crown but the precedents set today. From his perspective, permitting ambiguity to endure risks, normalizing a model in which royal status becomes a private asset rather than a public trust. The palace's position on Archie and Lilibet is therefore not merely reactive. It is preventative, designed to close off a path that could otherwise invite repetition. From the Sussexes' viewpoint, the decision has reportedly landed as a profound shock. Friends of the couple suggest that Harry and Meghan believed their children would remain insulated from institutional disputes, regardless of the tensions between the couple and the royal household. The confirmation that the palace has quietly settled on a restrictive interpretation of the children's status has been taken as evidence that the separation is no longer provisional. In their eyes, it signals that the monarchy is not preserving space for future reintegration, but is instead reorganizing itself in a way that permanently excludes them from its forward-facing narrative. Supporters of the palace dispute that characterization. They argue that Archie and Lilibet are not being disowned, removed from succession, or denied their heritage. Rather, the monarchy is clarifying a boundary that has always existed between family membership and constitutional role. In this interpretation, the decision is not punitive but protective. It shields the children from being drawn into public expectations they did not choose and prevents their royal status from being leveraged, intentionally or otherwise, in commercial or political contexts beyond the crown's control. Parliamentary sentiment has played a quiet but influential role in reinforcing this stance. Over the past several years, members of both the House of Commons and the House of Lords have increasingly questioned the unregulated use of royal titles by non-working royals. While no comprehensive legislation has yet been enacted to redefine these conventions, the pressure has been unmistakable. Senior palace figures are keenly aware that if the institution does not act to regulate itself, Parliament may eventually intervene. By settling on a restrictive internal policy now, the monarchy preserves its autonomy and avoids a more confrontational legislative reckoning later. Public opinion has further shaped the palace's calculus. Polling consistently indicates that a majority of the British public favors limiting royal titles to those who actively serve the institution. Many respondents expressed discomfort with the idea of royal status being associated with private commercial ventures or public commentary abroad. In this context, the palace's decision can be seen as an effort to align constitutional practice with public expectation, rather than resisting an inevitable shift. The practical implications of the decision are significant, even if they unfold quietly. Under the palace's settled position, Archie and Lilibet's titles are unlikely to feature in official royal communications, ceremonial planning, or future institutional narratives. They will not be presented as part of the monarchy's public-facing structure, nor positioned as potential working royals. Any use of their titles will be treated as private and social rather than institutional. Over time, this approach diminishes the symbolic and reputational weight those titles might otherwise carry. Critics of the palace argue that such an approach risks appearing austere or overly bureaucratic, particularly given the children's young ages. They contend that the monarchy should prioritize reconciliation and familial unity over structural neatness. In their view, the decision reinforces perceptions of an inflexible institution more concerned with rules than relationships. Defenders respond that compassion and clarity are not mutually exclusive, and that failing to define constitutional boundaries in the name of sentiment ultimately undermines the institution the children are born into. There is also a broader strategic dimension to the palace's move. By drawing a clear line now, the monarchy reduces the likelihood of future disputes over entitlement, representation, and role definition. It establishes a principle that can be applied consistently across generations: that royal status without service is unsustainable. Once embedded, this principle provides a framework for managing similar situations in the future, insulating the crown from recurring crises. For Harry and Meghan, the decision forces a moment of reckoning. Their post-royal life has been built on independence and self-authorship, yet royal identity has remained an undercurrent in their public narrative. The palace's stance makes clear that the institution will not support a hybrid model indefinitely. The Sussexes are free to define their own path, but the monarchy will no longer adjust its internal architecture to accommodate that choice. International observers note that the British monarchy is not alone in confronting such dilemmas. Other European royal families have taken decisive steps to limit or redefine titles when family members step away from official roles. In many cases, those reforms strengthened institutional legitimacy rather than diminishing it. The palace appears to be drawing on these examples as it charts a course that balances tradition with modern governance. What is perhaps most striking about the current moment is its restraint. There has been no public confrontation, no overt rebuke, and no attempt to dramatize the decision. Instead, the palace has allowed its position to emerge through consistent practice, careful briefings, and institutional silence. This reflects a broader evolution in royal strategy. Less reactive, more deliberate, and increasingly confident in its authority to define its own limits. For the monarchy, the decision regarding Archie and Lilibet is ultimately about preserving meaning. Titles are not decorative labels. They are symbols whose power depends on restraint and purpose. By limiting how those symbols are applied, the palace is reaffirming a foundational principle. Royal status is inseparable from responsibility. That principle may be uncomfortable for those who hoped for a different outcome, but it aligns with the institution's long-term survival strategy. As this chapter closes, it becomes clear that the era of ambiguity has ended. The palace has resolved a question that lingered unresolved for years, and in doing so has set a precedent that will shape the crown's future. Heritage alone, the monarchy has signaled, is no longer sufficient. The institution moves forward on duty, not symbolism. Whether Harry and Meghan accept, challenge, or reinterpret this reality remains uncertain. What is clear is that the message delivered, quietly but firmly, marks a decisive moment in the evolving relationship between the Sussex family and the institution they left behind.